to our colloquium. It's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Srdjan Capkun from EPFL Lausanne. He is finished, I believe, his PhD.
Well, we'll see.
He's finished his PhD, hasn't defended yet. That will happen July 12th, I believe.
Yeah.
He will get appropriately grilled.
Oh, yes.
So he was in the United States and is in the United States for a little while and decided to visit us, and he's going to talk about secure position and distance verification in wireless networks.
Okay, so thanks for this introduction and for the organization of the talk. This is a joint work with Jean-Pierre Hubault, who is my supervisor, and it's done in the Laboratory for Computer and Communication and Application at EPFL in Lausanne. And it's a part of a project which is called Terminals, which deals with large-scale ad hoc and self-organized systems that we have set up in Lausanne. So I'll first start with a brief introduction. So when we say that we want to locate a given device or a given human being, what we actually want to know is its particular location, or even the location of a given event. So if you find yourself on a deserted island in the middle of nowhere, what you usually want to know is, where am I? So you want to know where you are, your current position, and
the answer to that question is here.
And and one of the other questions that you might ask yourself is, as any good computer scientist, is, where is my laptop, or where is my internet connection? Well, some might even ask, where is my wife? But okay. So this is essentially what we are trying to do, but we are trying to secure it. What this exactly means, I will define a bit later. But currently, just to give you an idea, so if we can securely determine a position of a given device, or securely determine our own position, then this can be used for a number of services, such as location-based access control, location-based charging, or in multi-hop networks, in which we are particularly interested in. It can be used for secure routing, it can be used for secure data harvesting in sensor networks, and so on. And even as you can see on this picture, recently we became interested in monitoring of in traffic monitoring, so in car networks. So the overview of this talk is the following. So I will describe the current existing positioning techniques, and then I will describe some attacks on positioning, which you might already know. Then I will describe two secure positioning techniques that we developed, and then I will show how they can be applied to secure positioning in multi-hop networks. And then I will conclude and give some future work remarks. So when we are talking about positioning, what we are actually trying to usually do is to determine a position of a given device with respect to some base stations. These base stations know their own location, their own positions, and they, by measuring either received signal strength or time of flight of round-trip time of flight, or even some image processing, they are trying to determine the location of a particular node. For this, they can use all kinds of algorithms, such as multilateration, triangulation, time difference of arrival, or even location fingerprinting. Now, the existing positioning systems or projects, there are a lot, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list. So from GPS, which is very well known, to active badge, active bat, radar, and so on. These systems all operate with different assumptions. So some of them are based on radio frequency time of flight, some of them are based on infrared, some of them are based on ultrasound, where the time of the propagation of the sound is measured. Some of them are based on received signal strength measurements with radio frequency, And some of them are based on well, the newest ones are at least based on ultra-wideband technology. And in ad hoc and sensor positioning, there were a number of proposals, and they are still coming up. There are various optimizations, so as I said, this is certainly not an exhaustive list. I'm sure that this year there are already 4 or 5 new proposals for secure positioning in multi-hop networks, meaning the ones which are centralized, where all the distances from the nodes are collected in a central place, and then in some way the positions of the nodes are computed, or the ones in which you distribute this operation all over the network, and each node determines its own position. Now, you might be aware of these problems, but there are problems with GPS. Here I'm talking notably about civilian GPS. Military GPS has some other resilience to attacks, but typically civilian GPS can be spoofed, meaning that the GPS signal, which is very weak at the Earth's surface, can be let's say shadowed by the signal from GPS satellite simulators, which can then convince any device that it's located at any location. And this has already been used notably in Russia for cargo stealing and so on. So, and these simulators can be bought for up to $50,000. Now, maybe this is not the biggest problem of GPS, or its biggest limitation. Maybe its biggest limitation is location verification. So, meaning even if a device knows its own location, if you want to be sure where that device is, you need to ask him. So this device needs to tell you this, and you practically have no way of verifying where the device is unless you have some tamper-resistant hardware or software installed, which can provide you this information. And another limitation of GPS is that it works almost exclusively outdoors, and it doesn't cover urban canyons or even forests which are denser. Now there are other techniques which are used for positioning, notably receive signal strength based techniques, where a sender A sends a signal to receiver B. Sender A uses a given power at which it sends the signal. Receiver B receives this power, and based on these two power levels, these two receivers will determine their mutual distance because of the power decay. Now, this is a very simple technique. It has been used in radar, notably by Victor Ball. However, it has some disadvantages, like dishonest devices can cheat on the received or sent signal strengths, or even worse, a malicious attacker could jam the signal coming to a device and then transmit the same packet on a different level, on a different power level, so that these two nodes would seem to be closer or further than they actually are. Now, particularly interesting are techniques which are based on speed of light, such as radio frequency or infrared, where ideally, if A and B are synchronized, A sends a packet at a given time, then B receives this packet, and based on these two times, they determine their mutual distance, where you have to take into account C, which is the speed of light. Now, of course, if A and B are not synchronized, you can use some round-trip time. So A sends a signal, which is bounced off B, and A computes the distance based on the measured time, where you have to take into account the processing time at B. Now, if you base your solution on speed of sound, you don't need time synchronization. You can use radio signal as a synchronizing sequence. So you send the radio and the ultrasound signal at the same time, and you measure the difference between the time at which the radio signal arrived to the destination and the ultrasound signal arrived to the destination. Because of the very large difference in the speed of sound and the speed of light, you can assume that the radio signal arrived instantaneously, and therefore you don't need any synchronization. Now, of course, here the attacks are very similar to those that you can perform on received signal strength, which are that you can cheat, both devices can cheat on their sending and receiving times, and therefore you have no way of knowing what the distance actually is. And then you can have a malicious attacker which jams the packet which is supposed to be received by B and then resends it with a delay. So here we are talking about a distance enlargement attack. So the attacker can always do this. So jams and then resends with a small delay. Of course, you need quite a sophisticated equipment to do this, but still, it can be done. Now, with ultrasound, you can do even more. So with ultrasound, you can even reduce. You can convince the two nodes that they are closer than they actually are by creating a wormhole, with the radio signal. So you need, let's say, typically 2 attackers, which can transmit the signal faster than it would normally travel with the ultrasound. So just a short summary of these successful attacks on distance measurement. So what is shown here is what a dishonest node and a malicious attacker, a dishonest node meaning one of the parties involved in the process of distance measurement, and the malicious attacker meaning an outside attacker which tries to change the measured distance, can do. So with the received signal strength, they can enlarge or reduce the distance in both of them. With ultrasound, in ultrasound techniques, the same. With radio time of flight, however, they can perform only distance enlargement. If the malicious attackers can perform only distance enlargement, while a dishonest node can perform distance enlargement and distance reduction. We found this very interesting. So now coming to the main point of this talk is that our goal is basically to prevent a dishonest node from cheating on its own position. So this is the first goal that we want to achieve. And the second goal is preventing a malicious attacker from actually spoofing the location of an honest node. And one of the proposals is that we came up with is called verifiable multilateration. So for this we use a very old, well, relatively old paper, let's say 11 years, where Brands and Chaum introduced a protocol called distance bounding. Now this is basically a simplification of this. It wasn't only a single protocol; it was a set of protocols in that paper. This is a very, let's say, rough sketch how that protocol works. But for the details, I mean, you can read the paper, or if you don't know about it, or I can give you some references to it. However, the most important part of this paper, at least from the positioning side, was that here a base station or any node can actually upper bound its distance to another node or another device by sending a challenge and expecting a reply with and allowing a very small processing time. Meaning that here what you need to do is you need to assume that A, which can be an attacker, should not process the message more than a given time epsilon, which is a very small time. Okay, so if you do this, then in this case A can only delay the response, and it cannot send the message earlier, meaning that A can only perform a distance enlargement but not a distance reduction attack. I will go into maybe more details of this in the next slide. Just a remark. I really enjoy this paper because it contains very nice techniques how this short processing time can actually be achieved. So so they came up with a couple of ideas how can A have a very short processing delay. So meaning that during this reply to the challenge, just to perform a couple of very low cost and processing operations like XORs. Now, what is very interesting here is now that if we compare distance bounding to other techniques of distance measurement, you come to the conclusion that it's basically the strongest technique that you have, because it resists from, so if you have a dishonest node, it can only enlarge the distance, it cannot shorten it, and if you have a malicious attacker, the malicious attacker can do the same, so only enlarge the distance. If you can, of course, use distance bounding with ultrasound, which I will show later how it can be done, and in which case you achieve distance enlargement only with a dishonest node, but the malicious attacker, as we saw with the wormhole attack, can still reduce the distance. Now, what is the major difference between these two? Because it all works nicely in theory, but then when you come to practice, you don't know what to do with it, and the times are a bit tight. Meaning that with ultrasound distance bounding, as it was shown by David Wagner and Shankar and Sastry, it has some very nice properties. I mean, you know, the speed of sound is very slow. Today's computers can really handle it. 1 millisecond, 35 centimeters, great. So this processing time can actually be very, very small. So you can perform it with a microphone and your 802.11 adapter and your computer. So it works almost perfectly. Unfortunately, it doesn't really resist to this distance reduction attack, and we'll show why it's important later. So while radio frequency distance bounding is a bit more demanding. I mean, it requires nanosecond precision. 1 nanosecond is 30 centimeters, so every nanosecond counts. And we tried with 802.11, we tried with regular computers. I'll tell you why, but it finally didn't work. However, there are some positive results, because if you use ultra-wideband, you can have clock precision up to 2 nanoseconds, and you can have sub-foot precise positioning indoors and outdoors, because ultra-wideband will provide you a good resistance to multipath. And as these guys from Multispectral Solutions company, they showed that it really works. So they implemented it and they played with it, which is really nice. So this gives a hope that that with some technologies, even today, you can achieve nanosecond processing and nanosecond precision in your hardware. Now, okay. So just a short remark on this radio frequency distance bounding. So we did actually try to do it with 802.11, and we installed some high precision nanosecond timers on our laptops. And these timers more or less worked fine, so we could get precision up to 30-40 nanoseconds. However, the problem is really that 802.11 is really unpredictable with the sending times. I mean, even contention window, we reduced it to 0 seconds, so we even play with that. But you know, there was still such a huge unpredictability that you couldn't actually perform the measurements. But if you're interested in hearing more about that, you can ask me. It was, let's say, 4 months spent not very usefully, finally. In any case, so our idea is it's very simple, and after some thinking, very intuitive. So what we did is we proposed a mechanism which is called verifiable multilateration, or in this case trilateration, in which each of the base stations independently distance bounds the device, which is in this case A. So first you do it from BS3, from BS2, and from BS1, no synchronization required. And once that you do this, you compute the location of A, or at least you try, if all the distance bounds that you measured actually match. Now the trick is that since A can only enlarge the distances to all the 3 base stations, within the triangle, in order to enlarge one, it needs to reduce at least one of the remaining. And this is valid only within the verification triangle, as we call it. So only within the triangle formed by the three base stations. So why this happens? I mean, after some thinking, you can easily figure out. Basically, if A is here and tries to pretend to be anywhere else, it needs to fall into the circles, or needs to reduce its distance to any of the base stations, which it cannot do. Now, of course, so this scheme has some nice properties, which is that a node which is located within a triangle cannot prove to be at any other location within a triangle, except from its true location. Another nice property is that the node located outside of the triangle cannot pretend to be in the triangle, which is a very nice property for access control. And the same goes for a malicious attacker who tries to spoof the location of an honest node, meaning that a malicious attacker cannot convince the three base stations, which we call the verifiers, that the node is somewhere where it's not within the triangle, or if it was outside of the triangle, that it is actually inside the triangle. However, as in every good system, there are drawbacks. So a node can always show to be outside of the triangle by enlarging all the three distances, so it can show to be anywhere you want. So in some scenarios, this has some limitations, meaning that you can verify as much as you can, meaning if you have a triangular area in which you perform some access control based on the locations of the nodes, you can know if a node wants to show to you that it exists at all, if it can show to you that he is within the triangle, he is then indeed at that location within the triangle. But if it wants to show to you that it's somewhere outside, you cannot help it. But in that case, you do not grant any access to any services, because you could not verify that the node is at the area which provides the service. Now, after some thinking, you can also extend this to 3D, and all the 6 properties basically hold, except that here you are not talking about a triangle anymore, but more of a triangular pyramid in which this verification needs to take place. Now, the next logical question is that how to cope with measurement errors, because of course these measurements are not perfect, even if ultra-wideband is used, it will not be perfect. So here the solution is very simple. You need to know what the expected error might be of the system, and then you will compute the position of a node as if the distance bounds are correct. And then you will simply try to see whether the distance bound differs a lot from the computed position. And if it differs too much, then you will reject the verification of the position. Otherwise, you will accept. So this scheme typically, in order to be in order to be able to use it, you need to have some level of accuracy. Typically, this expected error delta should be smaller than the distance between the base stations, if not significantly smaller in some cases. Now, this is just roughly about verifiable multilateration, and now I'll just very briefly go through another technique which is maybe a bit more controversial because it's not fully worked out, but it's called verifiable time difference of arrival. So with this technique, we try to see how can we secure time difference of arrival, because it's a very important technique for passive device positioning. So how TDOA works is that the device sends out a signal, and the base stations are measuring the times at which this signal is received at each of the base stations. Then the device, given that they are tightly synchronized, which is a big assumption with time difference of arrival, Then they measure the differences between the reception times, the reception times of the signal. They form hyperbolas, and at the intersections of these hyperbolas, you find the location of the device. Now, TDOA, at first glance, prevents a dishonest node from cheating on its location, because a node is passive, he sends a signal, these three devices receive the signal, and it works very nice with omnidirectional antennas. Okay, so so if you have directional antennas, 3 directional antennas, you put them at 3 angles of A, and you send signals at whichever time you want, and you have a problem. However, in this case, we will consider only the case with omnidirectional antennas. We are still working on solutions which are related to directional antennas. Now, our idea here is to try to remain passive, meaning to try to allow time difference of arrival from being resistant not only to dishonest nodes, but to malicious attackers as well, but still enable passive positioning, meaning that A is sending signals and there is no feedback from B, from the base stations. How we do it is that we again use this verification triangle, but we use radio frequency time of flight, meaning that A is sending timestamps. However, here we have a very serious assumption, which is that A and the base stations are synchronized. So A is sending these timestamps, and the base stations are therefore performing not only time difference of arrival, but they're also checking whether the distances make sense within the triangle. So, meaning that they're not checking the honesty of A, but they are checking if an outside attacker is enlarging the distances towards A. Okay, and then they are checking for the consistencies of the distances. And then all the same applies as before. However, VTDOA has similar properties to those of verifiable multilateration, not the same because of well, it is, let's say, less resistant to attacks. So a brief comparison of the two approaches is the following. So verifiable multilateration, a great property is that the base stations do not need to be synchronized. This is really nice. It resists to attacks from directional antennas, so this is very nice. Now, also very important property is that there is no non-requirement is that there is no synchronization between the node and the base stations. And also, however, you need accurate nanosecond clocks at the base stations, you need distance bounding, and nodes need to be able to bound their processing. So these are the, and maybe one very important thing is that you need bidirectional communication. In some systems, like, let's say, sensor networks, this is not the nicest property to have. VTDOA, the base stations are mutually synchronized. You need accurate clocks at the base stations because of these clock synchronizations. However, you don't need processing bounds. And the nice property is that you only need uplink communication if the nodes and the base stations are tightly synchronized. So this can have some nice applications because of this last property, because synchronization can be so synchronization mechanisms can be run periodically once in a while to synchronize the nodes with the base stations, and then from that moment on you need only uplink communication from the node to the base stations. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a complete story if you didn't have attacks which actually work against this scheme. It would be a bit naive to expect that there are no attacks which work against this scheme. So, what if a device clones itself, and now you have 3 devices which are placed next to the base stations, and then they can pretend to be at any distance from any of the base stations as they want. They appear to the base stations as a single device, and therefore can position themselves wherever, this device can position itself wherever it wants. Solutions are not lightweight at all. So solutions to this can involve making parts of the devices tamper-proof, device fingerprinting. These are not lightweight solutions. One set of important issues that we are going to play with here in some future work are what are the requirements for these attacks on attacker synchronization, and what are the countermeasures that involve base station synchronization. Now, of course, one very straightforward example of how to implement this scheme, if you want to position sensors or any other devices, or if you want to track someone, is simply creating, well, not a grid, but some kind of a triangular grid of these base stations, and then each triple of the base stations covers a given area in which you want to verify the positions of the nodes. Now, this pretty much, the usage of this to sensor networks, in particular, requires a higher number of base stations than you would normally need if the sensor networks, if the sensor nodes would only communicate, would only need to communicate. Sorry. So this scheme requires a higher number of base stations than if each of the sensors would need only one base station at its power range. So this is much more restrictive because you need a triangle around every node. Now, how to address this issue will be the topic of the rest of my talk, because here, of course, the next logical step would be to involve nodes in to help each other to position themselves. Now, if you analyze what are the requirements of secure positioning in multi-hop, or in this case we are talking about static sensor networks, then you want to enable a central authority to securely determine a position of each node. This is the scenario which I was talking about maybe for the first part of the first part of the talk. A second, maybe not less important scenario is that you enable each node to securely determine its own position. Well, now here you can debate about several things. If a node trusts the infrastructure, and if the infrastructure determines its position, then the node can get this position from the infrastructure. However, if the infrastructure, if each node determines its own position, the infrastructure doesn't need to trust the node, because after all, the position verification is, in a way, needs to be resistant to compromise nodes as well. However, in the rest of the talk, I will talk about this second part because it is important for first for preservation of power to malicious outside attackers who want to either physically displace the nodes or who want to convince the nodes that they are somewhere where they are not. Now, the attacks on positioning in sensor networks can be really, I think you can come up with 10 more, but this is a rough classification of these attacks, which start with node displacement, when someone comes and displaces a node to another location, creates a wormhole, and convinces a node that it's still somewhere where it should be. Furthermore, an attacker can create a wormhole per se, just to mess up the routing tables. Then a malicious attacker can, as we saw, maliciously enlarge the distances between the nodes. There is one cute attack that I like here, is that if you have no base stations, a powerful attacker can scale up the whole network. You take the network and you simply scale up all the links. And then it seems to you if you run the positioning algorithm, like all the nodes are spread up to a much wider surface than they actually are. And then, of course, if you have a compromised node, a node can report false distance and position information in order to influence the computation of the positions of other nodes. Now, of course, in our scheme, the assumptions are the following. So we have a set of base stations which do not cover the whole network. So there is just a subset, let's say a small number of base stations which are connected to some node in the network. Now, these base stations are trusted. They know their own positions, and they are protecting from tampering and from displacement. I mean, I don't like this assumption, but because if you put sensors on a field, and if you need to, pour some concrete onto a subset of them, this is not a very elegant solution. I mean, not in the spirit of sensor networks, at least. Now, these base stations, however, you can think of them as even being mobile sometimes, or being protected for some periods of time. Now, the idea is that the sensors are positioned with the help of the base stations and with the help of their neighboring sensors. Now, the assumption that I know that people from sensor network community certainly will not like is that the sensors have nanosecond precision timers, and they are able to bound their processing delays. Now, I had a brief chat with Mani Srivastava on this, and he told me, yeah, but the sensors that we currently have, I mean, they cannot handle millisecond precision, and nanosecond is like a fantasy. Sure, but you are building the sensor as a specialized piece of equipment, so it's a dedicated hardware per se. If it's a dedicated hardware, and if you need positioning to be secure, then you can have nanosecond precision modules which are maybe attached to these sensors. So let's assume that if it is not really, if we cannot implement it today, we will be able in some time in the future. So, of course, sensors either share pairwise keys or have some other means of mutual authentication. A sensor can authenticate and be authenticated by the base station, so all the information that they receive and send is protected. How this is achieved, there are now, after Eschenauer and Gligor paper, there are like zillions of proposals tackling the same problem from different angles. So I'm not going to go into this. I will just now propose two solutions to this problem of sensor positioning. Now, one solution is that we have a centralized approach in which all the distances between the nodes are gathered. Then they are processed by a central authority which computes their location. Here we will introduce a scheme called basic distance verification, in which only, let's say, we will be able to determine the secure distances, and then we'll use these secure distances for positioning. I'll show how. The same story applies to the decentralized approach, where you take these secure distances and then you try to determine a position of each node with the secure distances. Now, how to obtain these secure distances, we call the scheme basic distance verification, which consists in a very simple and, let's say, very straightforward application of verifiable multilateration. If V wants to verify its distance to U, what it does is that it forms around U a verification triangle with V1 and V2, checks if U falls within this verification triangle. Of course, before doing this, V obtains all the distance bound from its neighbors, which its neighbors measured between them and the distance bound that it measured to its neighbors. Then V performs positioning, let's say, verifiable multilateration of U within this triangle. and in this way verifies whether the distance is correct or not. Now, of course, oops, a very natural thing would be to say, okay, if it forms one of the triangles, it may as well form all the others, because after all, a node received all these distance bounds, so communication cost is already there, so why not process it? Okay, we have some processing cost in the node, which also consumes some power, but certainly much less than the communication, so let's make sure that it's well used. And then what V does is it checks if the measurements from all the triangles that it formed around you actually match up to a given error. If they do, we can consider this distance to be secure, and if they don't, then we reject to use this distance in positioning algorithms. Of course, if you use only a single triangle, then if we use only a single triangle around you, then this scheme is very vulnerable. However, so it's vulnerable even to an attack by a single compromised and a single malicious node, which collude, or by two malicious nodes, which collude, or by two compromised nodes. So it resists only to a single compromised or a single malicious node, which is not good. It's not very high resistance. However, we have to keep in mind, so this scared me a bit at the beginning, so I said, oh, maybe it doesn't work. However, given that you can form so many of these triangles around the node, and I'll show you how many, and given that this distance enlargement by a set of malicious nodes is only local, maybe we can do much more. So, and how much can we do will depend on the number of these triangles and on their mutual dependence. Meaning that if V is able to form independent triangles around you, independent here meaning that besides V, these triangles do not share any other joint node, then this scheme resists to attacks from K malicious or compromised nodes, in the case in which the claimant is compromised, claimant meaning you, and to attacks from 2K minus 1 otherwise. Here it's maybe not important, this analysis, as much as it is obvious the strength of this scheme grows linearly with the number of these triangles, independent triangles that you are able to form. However, if the triangles are mutually dependent, then this resistance is probabilistic, because you can have triangles which have joint nodes, meaning joint links. So if you increase one of the links, you can jeopardize the 2 or 3 triangles which depend on that link. Now, to see about the number of triangles, of course, the number of independent triangles, I mean, it shoots out very fast. You know, here you have no density. You have the average number of verification triangles formed by a node per distance. Okay, so meaning you take you take V, you take this distance, and you want to see how many triangles V can form around you. So number of independent triangles, very nice. I mean, you get to 100 with 500 nodes per 100 times 100 meters with 25 meter power range. Now the number of independent triangles, this is very small. Now, given the probabilistic nature of the independent triangles, I mean, when you imagine 100 dependent triangles being formed, and imagine these, let's say, 5 independent triangles and 100 independent triangles being formed, it's very hard to expect that an attacker can actually jeopardize the system, because it has to really compute quite a lot how to resolve all these triangles so that they actually match. Now, so that's why this is kind of, I mean, this is not a computed line here. This is just the line that I put there, which basically shows that the resistance of the scheme is somewhere in between these two lines. So if you have K independent triangles, then the scheme is resistant to at least K attackers. Okay? But to at most 100. Oh, sorry. Yeah, to at most this upper line of dependent triangles. So it's somewhere in between. How to exactly compute this? We don't know. I mean, it's really tough. I mean,
Hard to count.
It's hard to count. Yeah, exactly. Very, very hard to count, because it would involve a lot of combinations, trials, and so on for us to design attacks and then to try to see which attacks actually succeeded and so on. So if you have some ideas, I'd love to hear them. Now, of course, the next question that you ask yourself is not only how many triangles am I able to form, but how many distances to my neighbors can I securely verify? Can I consider to be secure? Now, here, this first line is the average number of node neighbors. As the density increases, this number increases. That's nice. Now, the second line represents an average number of distances that each node is able to verify to its neighbors. Okay. And this third line represents the average number of distances to your neighbors which you are able to verify, but your neighbor is also able to verify. Okay. So these are the distances that both of the neighbors are able to verify, which is very important because this line here actually gives you the idea how much of a secure positioning you can do. Because if you can verify a distance to your neighbor and he cannot to you, then it's very debatable how can an information about the network coordinate system propagate into the network. I'll just briefly go through this because I don't have much time at the end. I'll just briefly sketch a very, let's say, very first centralized secure positioning system that we came up with, which is that a central authority. So if you now think about a centralized secure positioning, so a central authority now gathers all these distances, all the distance bounds from the nodes. Now what it can do, it can perform this basic distance verification on each of the measured bounds to verify them. Okay? And then it can compute the positions of the nodes only with these verified distances. However, there will be a subset of distances which were not verified. And this is for a very simple reason. I mean, if V is able to form a verification triangle around U, it will be able to verify its distance to U. But it's not going to be able to verify its distances to V2 and V3 because this is the end of its power range. So it cannot form a triangle around V3 and V2. So what we here introduced is a very naive solution which we are going to refine in the future, which is that after you do positioning with the verified distances, then you try to verify the computed positions match with the distances that could not have been verified with the scheme. So you try to see who is actually cheating if someone is cheating. Now the scheme is not perfect, and I said we have a lot of things to do there. So, and here this is just a sketch as well of a decentralized secure positioning algorithm, where this will just give you maybe an intuition. I don't know how many of you were dealing with decentralized secure decentralized positioning, but there are a number of proposals there, and I mean it would take a separate lecture to go through all of them. However, our idea is to use this basic primitive of basic distance verification and plug it into each of these solutions to see how it works. Here we proposed we used our old solution that we proposed for GPS repositioning, which consists in creating a network coordinate system in some centers, like these base stations. They know what the coordinate system is, they give it to each of these nodes, give it meaning they compute their positions. Then by, let's say, by some other mechanism, this coordinate system is propagated into the network. I didn't want to go into details here. What I wanted to emphasize here, what an important issue in this scheme is, if you use this propagation of the coordinate system, density is crucial. I mean, it depends how many neighbors you have around. If you have 5 neighbors around you and all 5 lie, well, then that's it. Then you have no way of verifying that you are where you actually are, unless you yourself try to pick up as much as you can around you and recompute your position again. So Manisri Astava and Savides, and they have a very nice algorithm which can be used, which enables you basically to make some local broadcast in your neighborhood, obtain distances between your wider neighborhood, and then compute your position based on this, and of course of your neighbors as well. However, the larger the neighborhood is, the more you pay in terms of power. This I'm not going to show. Now, just a brief comment here, which is that if you want to do secure positioning, and if you want to propagate network coordinate systems between the nodes, you need to have a much higher density than if you want the network to be connected. Meaning that out of all your neighbors, here the number of neighbors is 30, you can use only 12 of them, so you need the density of such density that, so you will use only 12 of them to propagate the coordinate system further. So you can use only 12 of them to do this. In the next slide, it will be maybe a bit more clear what I mean by this. So just to show you the price that you have to pay for secure positioning in terms of node density. So this is a fraction of the nodes in the largest strongly connected component. Here the graphs are formed. So the first graph, the first line represents node connectivity. The network it will become connected very, very fast. Okay, already at 70 nodes you are fine. The network is connected. Now, if you want to do positioning, so pure positioning, no security, no verification of the position and so on. So just do pure positioning. What you need is around 150 already. Okay, because if you don't have this, not all the nodes will be able to compute their positions in the system. This is what this curve means. And then, if you want secure positioning, one of which is stronger, the other one is weaker, you need much more. So you are already in the range of 250 nodes per 100 times 100 meters. So this is of course decentralized positioning. But these are the minimal requirements that you need. So if you want to be able to verify all the distances that you use in your positioning system, if you are willing to compromise for less, that's also fine. I mean, then you have to say that then we have to define some other criteria. But here we wanted to do positioning in such a way that each of the distances is actually verified by at least one verification triangle, which of course has a large impact on the requirements. Now this is just a sample. This sample, of course, you are not going to read much from this picture. It's just an output of our simulations, and these red lines represent the nodes which were able to assist each other in positioning, let's say, propagating network coordinate system. But this is less important to see. What is more important to see here is that, I mean, why these nodes are not connected? Of course, they are boundary nodes. No one can form triangles around them, so they cannot be connected. So you cannot securely determine their own position. So the most obvious thing that you see here is that if you want to securely position a sensor network, you need to put the base stations around, which will not only prevent these nodes to be moved without being noticed, but also it will prevent the scale-up attack. I kind of like that attack a lot. So they will, if you imagine a network of nodes, and if you try to take it and stretch it, if you put some base stations which are firm, which hold their distance, so they're not made out of rubber, but they are firm, you cannot do it, because they will prevent you from doing it. Now the conclusion of the talk, oops. Okay, so the conclusion of the talk is the following. So that, well, these are more like statements of what's been done or what's been said. So we propose two techniques for secure verification of device positions for the cases in which the devices are untrusted and in the presence of malicious attackers. And what we are particularly happy about is that it seems that these techniques can be integrated into existing positioning techniques with some additional effort and with some additional requirements, but still they can be integrated in multilateration and time difference of arrival positioning systems. Now, this is maybe a very important point here, is that these systems can provide you the same positioning precision as the underlying mechanisms do. However, you will probably need, this is what we are looking at, you'll probably need higher precision to be able to determine whether the position is verifiable or not, or whether the position is, let's say, secure or not. And also, we have here just demonstrated, and more, you can see more in the paper which is online, that the proposed techniques can be used for secure positioning in multi-hop networks, both with landmark-based approach, meaning when you cover the whole network with landmarks, or with some distributed positioning algorithm, or even with some centralized positioning algorithm. Maybe the only conclusion on this slide is that to secure positioning in multi-hop or sensor networks, you typically require higher density. But I repeated this already several times, so maybe it's not needed. Now, current and future work. There are a lot of things that excite us here. There are a lot of things that we want to see. We want to see how to implement this distance bounding with ultra-wideband. There are not so many. It's not easy. We'll try to figure it out. What we are also looking at, besides ultra-wideband, and it's not written here, is how to make better use of ultrasound distance bounding with a similar approach, and to see how much resilience it can offer us. We already know this, but let's say that we need to write it down and think a bit more about it. Further investigations, of course. Here I didn't even touch the communication cost, cryptographic cost, or possible numerous optimizations of these solutions, especially with respect to communication and cryptographic cost. And we want to see in this slide what is the best algorithm where this basic distance verification can fit. So if we take it, if we plug it, because optimizing all these, people are spending their thesis again doing it without security. Now, if you plug in security into it, it's not very easy. So that's why we are trying to take this basic distance verification, which is a very simple technique, and then plug it into these algorithms and see what we get. What is very important is the detection of sensor removal and displacement. If you want to do this, of course, you're not going to run this algorithm periodically over and over again, because it will cost you a lot. So This is partially addressed in our paper. We propose some periodic local schemes for this. However, these consume some time as well, some power as well. So it's not very easy, and I think here we'll see more solutions certainly in the future. And last but not least, coping with measurement errors. This is also very important. So we'll try to include these results as well into our future secure positioning simulation. Now, if you're interested in some references, I can provide them for you, or in any case, you'll have the slides in one form or another, and I'll put these slides online in some very near term.
Okay, thank you very much.
1 hour. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead.
In the slide that you addressed, the bar shows a sparse base station that didn't cover the whole network. Is there any assumption that each node in that triangular should be in one half of those base stations?
No, that's the.
This one.
Yeah, no, that's the. No, there's no assumptions of this kind. What we are basically trying to say, what I try to say here is that we only need these base stations as anchors to prevent this scale-up attack, and we need them as shown in as shown here, and we need them to initiate the network coordinate system, because someone needs to give you the reference, and that's all that we need them for. Later on, the nodes will, so nodes which are not in the direct power ranges of these base stations will determine their own location based on other positions. Okay, so they are not here. We are not talking about. I mean, there is no requirement of that kind. The only requirement is that you need to have these triplets of base stations in order to securely propagate the coordinate system into the network. And from that point on, the network each node should be able to compute its own position in the coordinate system. How securely? It's a very hard problem. Yeah.
In your computations, you are assuming that your base station is reliable.
Yeah, base station.
Right. Suppose you have a density. You have to try to narrow down which particular node is being dishonest or being overshadowed. Right?
Okay.
Suppose you have the extra information. Suppose you are able to that one node is relaying wrong information, or one base station is being compromised.
That's a very good question, and I must say it gave me a lot of thought. So we haven't addressed this at all. So there is no. I haven't developed any mechanisms so far. Maybe they're easy, maybe they're difficult. I don't know, but I haven't checked any global mechanisms by which you can pinpoint who is lying. What the system tries to do is basically use the redundancy that it has in order to compute securely. So the system is purely binary. Either it will, because the distance will not match, or it will succeed. But then to be able to detect who was actually lying, this, I mean, I can put it as a bullet on the future work. So I don't know really. As far as the compromise of the base station goes, this we haven't really observed. I mean, compromising a base station, we need to rely on something. So, and this assumption was that the base stations cannot be compromised or tampered with or even moved. So that's about it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, who's handling this?
You go ahead and we'll go counterclockwise.
This trilateralization comes from the assumption of three-dimensional group, right?
You mean this? Okay, let me go back maybe to.
When using the triangles.
Okay. I know what you say. What if I pick the node and then, he's here, and I'll just, oops. Exactly. So this is the node, now I pick it up. So what do I?
And do you need like pyramids or other constructions to consider?
Okay. So there are the first one is a very simple one. So, as I showed on one of the, I have a pyramid, a triangular pyramid. The base is a triangle. You put a node and you get the within the pyramid. So maybe an interesting issue. Pick it up. Putting it in the air, can I prove that he's somewhere in the triangle where he's not? No, I cannot. So that's a very nice property that of this scheme, because if a node is here, in order to show that it's within the triangle, you need to kind of press it down and the distance bounds hold.
And the triangle is a vague for me in three dimensions. Triangle itself is flat. And base station can be in different altitude in a drop or something.
This is true. This is true. So here, one of the assumptions that we have is, and maybe that should be mentioned. So it's a valid point. Is that I mean, the system will not fail if the surface is not even, but rough or some. Just won't work exactly. So that's maybe a drawback. Exactly. So it just won't work because you small kill, and you will not be able to turn the triangle. So not working. Exactly.
Like and just repeat everything.
Oh yeah, this is. I mean, what we considered is that the errors which are introduced by this time synchronization are basically the same as the errors which are introduced by distance bounding. I mean, it's in some parts of
go ahead.
So in some parts of the talk, we assumed that there is a synchronization between the two devices.
What I meant was more like look at the quality of your clocks. I mean, if you really want high resolution location, then you have to have, in some sense, high resolution clocks, and that's
high stability.
Obviously, and you don't want to have too much skew and all that. And that seems to introduce some very sharp, some very hard bounds in how good you can, how well you can actually do that position.
I perfectly agree. That's why I like at first. Maybe because of this this first part called verifiable multilateration is maybe better worked out, because there we know more. Now when we come, because there we don't use synchronization because of the security properties. You cannot trust the guide, and therefore synchronization is not an option by distance bounding. But in this second part where we said we want passive positioning, so with verifiable time difference of arrival, now there we still have to work that out.
Tom's and Stefan Brand's scheme because you didn't want to assume synchronization to start with.
But first of all, we didn't want to assume synchronization, and maybe more important is that you cannot be sure that the other guy is lying, and therefore with the distance bounding you upper bound the distance to this guy. So this is a very strong primitive for which, I mean, they obviously in 1993, I mean, they used it for in a completely different setting. I mean, they assume that they have a wired communication, and they assume that the attacker is a fast wireless attacker, which here, I mean, maybe in 2004, this seems a bit ridiculous because the things are maybe vice versa, because a wired attacker is certainly much more faster because it creates a wormhole, a wired wormhole, versus maybe much slower wireless one. So it's a very fast primitive, and we used it exactly because of this, because you cannot cheat, you cannot pretend to be closer. Not because we didn't like time synchronization. Time synchronization is nice, but if you replace distance bounding with simple time synchronization, and then you measure the distances based on this, then you get the weaker security guarantees, meaning that you are protecting the system from an outside attacker which wants to enlarge the distances, while you completely trust the node whose position you want to obtain. And that's kind of these are, let's say, two nice things about the scheme. You can take, let's say, less demanding technique and a more demanding technique and get higher or lower levels of security guarantees.
Okay, anything else? Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
As a distributed position, I'm assuming that you are propagating the local coordinate systems, right? And in this propagation, there is error accumulation. And what you suggested is that there is an expected error, but this expected error is not static, it increases by error propagation. So how you are going to take care of this?
Excellent point. I already had this question, and it's an extremely valid one. Our technique that we use here is not the best one for this, exactly because of this reason. So it can work. We did some experiments, and
actually, before you go on, did you all understood the question which was posed? Maybe you should rephrase the question because I'm not sure everyone else understood.
So the question is basically the following. I mean, you have a network coordinate system which is propagated from one location to all the other nodes in the network. Okay. However, given that each of the distances involves some errors, this error will be accumulated over in each and every step. So, first hop neighbors will maybe get better precision than the second hop neighbors, and so on. So what you asked was, at least what I understood, is that at one point this system will produce such an error that this secure position will not work anymore. Not that it's going to become insecure, but it's simply not going to work because it will grow. The error will grow higher than this delta that I showed earlier. Now, this is so. I have an answer to this, which is a very simple one. This delta error is used only within a verification triangle. Okay, so when you verify your local distances, then you are testing if these local distances, if this distance that you are going to verify is different more or less than a delta from the measured distance values. Therefore, you are not worried about the accumulation or the propagation of the error further into the system, because you rely on these distances as if they were correct. Okay, so you do not compute your own position and then decide, this is much, however, there is another thing. Once that you computed all these distances, you verified all these distances, and you compute your own position, there is a problem of the difference in the coordinate system direction which you propagate into the network. It's not that much about a difference in the exact location as much as the difference in the orientation of the coordinate system that you propagate into the network. And that's maybe a bigger issue. I haven't addressed this yet, so because our simulations were so far done purely without any errors in the system. So this is something that we still have to investigate. So maybe an honest answer would be, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see in some future work how it works. There are some encouraging results, however, from Manis Srivastava's group, because they have an algorithm which does not work with propagation of the coordinate systems into the network, and therefore they claim that their algorithm prevents from an error to be accumulated in each step. But I still have to see that. I mean, we have to work out maybe our own independent implementation, plug in the security requirements, and then see how that algorithm would work. Because maybe this propagation is indeed specific only to our system. Our measurements at the beginning, when I was dealing with this positioning algorithms in ad hoc networks, were that after 5 hops, the error that is accumulated becomes larger than your power range. So let's say if you want to use it for secure routing, if you dealt with secure routing, you would know that this is, let's say, the limit until which you can actually use it.
Okay. So I have another sort of comment or question, depending upon how you want to view it. You can view the cellular phone system as a very rudimentary form of an ad hoc network. Very rudimentary. So basically, if I call from my cellular phone, which I don't have, since I don't own one, I call 911. 911 here is emergency. Okay. It turns out that they can actually locate me. And one of the reasons why they can locate me is because they know more or less the base station that picks up my signal, and they can figure out the distance from the base station, and then they can also figure out the direction, and they can pick me up. So my question to you is, let's assume that the mobile ad hoc networks that you're talking about are going to have certain structures in them. How much better can you do in terms of the bounds that you get by using simplified networks? In other words, if you add knowledge about or constraints about the structure of the network, can we actually improve on any of the bounds that you have?
Of course. I'm sure that, but this is purely a positioning issue.
Yeah.
I guess so. Well, this is I mean, the more base stations you have, in principle, is you will get a better estimate of the positions. If I understood you correctly.
Right. More base stations and perhaps some other information. You know,
That
where
might
you can
be-
correlate.
Well,
There are some correlations you already told us,
Yeah.
right? I mean, basically sound
yeah, sure.
versus
Well,
light.
there are solutions which are very cute and which I like a lot, which are location fingerprinting solutions.
Right.
So this is kind of maybe a unified general name for all these techniques which try to, based on the signal property, either from which direction it comes or from or what are some other properties of the signal determine where it actually comes from. However, these techniques are require a very very heavy bootstrapping phase, because you need, for instance, to go around, measure, pre-measure, check, and so on. But I mean, of course, you can correlate a lot of information, and then.
So, for example, some constraint that I can place. Suppose that I can shield in my device my clock. So now I have the property that if my clock is synchronized, the adversary that captures my device either maintains that synchronization, in which case I have some advantage over the adversary, or if it tries to destroy the synchronization, the clock will go dead, and then I know that the device is captured, and I remove it from the calculation of the position. So this kinds of information, when you add in terms of security, how much better can you do?
Yeah, I mean, just to give you a hint about, there are two papers online. First one is about, let's say, the first part of the talk, and the second one is maybe more on sensor networks. And in this first one, we also addressed another issue that you might be, let's say, interested to hear briefly. And this is, you said, using additional information.
Right.
Okay. So this additional information, we propose a system which is based on radar, for instance. So combining radars, so if you have a car, and if you want to bind a radar reading, if you want to give identities to the vehicles which are in front of you. So radar will give you a passive image. It should say, okay, there are 5 cars in front of you, and they are located there and there.
Yeah.
But maybe you want to give identities to these cars, and you want to be sure that these identities are correct. So we did a kind of a matching between radar and distance bounds, or distance estimations, a bit weaker. But that's, let's say, an example of using an alternative source of information. In another, because as you might have noticed, maybe not, but the talk is called position and distance verification. Now this verification was kind of too long for the whole talk, so I rounded it up around sensor networks. But the second mechanism that we used is to verify a distance based on GPS locations, but in such a way that the nodes do not know where the other guy is. So I don't know where you are, and what I do is I commit to my GPS coordinate, I send you this coordinate, and we measure the distance, and then I release my coordinate. Now I have to know how to lie. It's a probabilistic scheme, it's quite cute, but it can enable you, so these kind of alternative sources can really enable you to verify distances.
Yeah, in some sense it's a fair exchange type.
Exactly. So it enables you to, and it boils down to this. If you want mutual verification of the distances, it becomes a fair exchange problem. But these are alternative. So typically my future work consists in these kind of verification mechanisms, either distances or maybe you saw on Sassen there is this paper sector which dealt with encounter verifications and position verification. But then I guess there is quite a lot of stuff to still be resolved here.
Okay, thank you very much again. So Srdjan will be around until about, let's see, it's 4:30, until about